I'm 68 years old, and I never thought I'd end up here, standing in a courtroom, facing my own son across a polished oak table that might as well be the Grand Canyon. Judge Davidson adjusts his glasses and reviews the papers in front of him. His expression is carefully neutral, the face of a man who's seen too many families tear themselves apart over money. My hands are trembling, so I press them flat against the table, willing them to be still. Connor sits at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Walsh in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, whispering something in his ear. He nods without looking at me. He hasn't looked at me once since we entered this courtroom. That's what hurts most. Not the lawsuit, not the accusations, but the fact that my son, the baby I carried for 9 months, the boy I nursed through chickenpox and heartbreaks and his father's death just 6 months ago, that boy can't even meet my eyes. Mrs. Harrington, Patricia Walsh's voice cuts through my thoughts like scissors through silk. My client has been forced into this unfortunate situation because of genuine concerns about the management of his late father's estate. Forced. The word makes my jaw clench. Nobody forced Connor to file this lawsuit. Nobody forced him to try to have me declared incompetent. Nobody forced him to choose money over his own mother. But I know who whispered in his ear. I know whose manicured nails are digging into my son's back, pushing him toward this. Your Honor, Patricia continues, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. Connor Harrington has watched his mother make questionable financial decisions since his father's death. Large charitable donations, rejection of lucrative business offers, and most concerning, a complete refusal to consult with her only son, the natural heir, about any major decisions regarding the family company. I want to stand up and shout that it's all lies, that I've been running Harrington Transport alongside my husband for 40 years, that those questionable donations were to cancer research in Philip's name, exactly as he would have wanted, that the lucrative offers came from corporate raiders who would have gutted the company and fired all 50 families who depend on those paychecks. But my lawyer, Howard Bennett, Philip's friend for 30 years, puts a gentle hand on my arm. Not yet, he murmurs. Let them finish hanging themselves. Connor finally glances my way, just for a second. In that brief moment, I search his face for the boy I raised. The toddler who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, convinced they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. The teenager who cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. The young man who held his father's hand in those final days and whispered, "I love you, Dad." But all I see now is a stranger, a 42-year-old man whose face is tight with something I can't quite read. Desperation? Guilt? Or just the cold calculation that his wife has been teaching him? My mind flashes back to 6 months ago. Philip's hospital room, the steady beep of machines. Connor had come to visit, but Vanessa stayed in the car. She's not good with hospitals, Connor had explained, not meeting his dying father's eyes. Philip had just squeezed my hand tighter and whispered, Daphne, remember what we talked about. Trust the plan. I hadn't understood then. I'd been too focused on losing the man I'd loved for 45 years, too consumed by grief to question why Philip had called Howard to the house so many times in those final weeks. Too trusting to wonder what they were planning in his study while I sat outside, listening to the murmur of their voices through the door. Now, standing in this courtroom, watching my son try to take everything Philip and I built together, I finally understand. Philip had seen this coming. Your Honor, Patricia Walsh places a document on the judge's bench. We have evidence that Mrs. Harrington, despite her contributions as a homemaker, lacks the business education and experience necessary to manage an $8 million company. We're asking this court to dissolve the trust established in Philip Harrington's will and grant my client immediate access to his rightful inheritance. Judge Davidson looks up, his eyes moving from Patricia to Connor to me. For a moment, just a moment, I see something like sympathy in his expression. Or maybe it's pity. I'm not sure which is worse. Mrs. Harrington, the judge says, his voice measured and calm, you'll have your opportunity to respond. But first, I'd like to hear from your son directly. He looks at Connor. Mr. Harrington, would you like to address the court? Connor stands, and I notice his hands are shaking too. Good. At least he has the decency to be nervous about destroying his mother. Your Honor. His voice cracks slightly and he clears his throat. I don't want to be here. I love my mother, but someone has to protect my father's legacy. Someone has to make sure that 40 years of his hard work doesn't just disappear because of emotional decisions and poor business judgment. Emotional decisions. Is that what he calls honoring his father's wishes? Is that what he calls taking care of the employees who built this company alongside us? My mother, Connor continues, and now he's looking at me, really looking at me for the first time, has always been the heart of our family. But my father was the mind of the business, and now that he's gone, he trails off, his jaw working. I'm afraid she's going to lose everything he built, everything he wanted to pass down to me, to us. The words sound rehearsed. I can practically see Vanessa's script written across his forehead, but there's something in his eyes, something that makes my heart break all over again. He actually believes it. Connor actually believes he's the hero in this story, saving the family fortune from his incompetent, grieving mother. And that's when I know. Philip was right. Our son is lost. Maybe not forever, but right now, in this moment, the Connor I raised is buried under so many layers of Vanessa's manipulation and his own weakness that I can't reach him anymore. Judge Davidson nods slowly. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Mrs. Harrington, your attorney may present your defense. Howard stands, his movements deliberate and calm. He's 70 years old, with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that made Philip trust him with everything, including this. Your Honor, Howard says, his voice filling the courtroom with quiet authority. Before we go any further, I think it's important that this court understands the full history of the Harrington family, because this case isn't really about business management or estate administration. This is about a father's final gift to his son, and whether that son will have the character to receive it. I see Patricia Walsh's eyes narrow. Connor leans forward confused, and I think about Philip's last words to me. Trust the plan, Daphne, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. The judge settles back in his chair. I'm listening, Mr. Bennett. And so it begins. Your Honor, if I may, the story starts long before this courtroom. It starts in 1982, when Daphne O'Connor, that was her maiden name, met Philip Harrington at a charity auction. Howard glances at me and I nod. He's going to tell our story, not the sanitized version Connor thinks he knows, but the real one, the one that matters. Daphne was 26, Howard continues, a second-grade teacher from an Irish immigrant family. Philip was also 26, the son of a mechanic, who'd just taken out a loan to buy 2 used delivery trucks. He had a dream and no money. She had a teaching degree and a fierce independent streak. Neither of them came from wealth. Neither of them expected wealth. I close my eyes and I'm there again. The Knights of Columbus Hall, decorated with streamers that had seen better days. Philip in a suit jacket that was slightly too big for his thin frame, bidding on a dinner-for-2 certificate he probably couldn't afford. I'd thought he was bidding for someone else, some girlfriend waiting at home. But after he won, he'd walked right up to me and said, I don't know anyone in this town yet. Would you do me the honor of helping me use this before it expires? I should have said no. I'd gone to that auction with my roommate, and I'd promised myself I was done with men after my last boyfriend had borrowed $200 and disappeared. But there was something about Philip's smile. Something honest. They married a year later, Howard is saying, pulling me back to the present. And here's what's important for this court to understand. Daphne Harrington was never just a homemaker. From day one, she was Philip's partner, his equal. Connor shifts in his seat. I can see his lawyer taking notes, probably trying to figure out where Howard is going with this. Daphne worked as a teacher during the day, Howard continues, and every evening she did the bookkeeping for Harrington Transport. She designed the routing schedules. She negotiated with clients. When they couldn't afford to hire a dispatcher, she sat by the phone and coordinated deliveries herself. While Philip drove trucks, Daphne built the systems that made the company work. It's true, all of it. I remember those nights, sitting at our kitchen table with ledgers spread out in front of me, trying to figure out how to keep 2 trucks running on revenue that barely covered gas and maintenance. Philip would come home at midnight, exhausted, and I'd have dinner waiting and a list of delivery confirmations for him to review. We're building something, he'd say, kissing the top of my head. Together. Always together. In 1982, Howard says, Connor was born. And even then, Daphne didn't step away from the business. She brought the baby to work. She taught part-time. She found a way to be both mother and business partner because that's what the situation required. I glance at Connor, wondering if he remembers any of this. Does he remember sitting in a playpen in the corner of our tiny office, surrounded by invoices and shipping manifests? Does he remember how his father and I would take turns holding him during phone calls with clients? Probably not. Children rarely remember the sacrifices their parents make. They just remember the childhood they lived through, with no context for what it cost. By the time Connor was 10, Howard continues, Harrington Transport had 20 trucks. By the time he was 18, they had 50. The company was worth approximately $2 million, and Daphne Harrington had been there for every decision, every expansion, every contract negotiation. Howard pauses, letting that sink in. Then he looks directly at Patricia Walsh. So when opposing counsel suggests that Mrs. Harrington is merely a homemaker who lacks business acumen, they're not just wrong. They're erasing 40 years of partnership and contribution. Daphne Harrington didn't inherit this company. She built it, alongside her husband, with her own mind and her own hands. I see Connor's face change, just slightly, like maybe for the first time, he's actually thinking about what his parents' life was like before he could remember, before he assumed that everything they had was just there. Judge Davidson leans forward. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the history lesson, but how does this relate to the current dispute over the trust? Your Honor, it relates to everything, because you need to understand. Philip Harrington didn't leave his estate to his wife because she was his widow. He left it to her because she was his partner, the person who understood the business as well as he did, the person he trusted most in the world. Howard opens his briefcase and pulls out a folder. I have here financial statements from the past 6 months, the period since Philip's death, when Mrs. Harrington has had full control of the company. He hands copies to the judge and to Patricia Walsh. I watch Connor lean over to look at his lawyer's copy, his brow furrowed. As you can see, Howard continues, under Mrs. Harrington's management, the company's revenue has increased by 22%. She's secured 3 major new contracts, including one with Morrison Logistics, which had been pursuing Harrington Transport for 5 years. She's improved driver retention by 15% by increasing benefits and safety equipment, and she's maintained a zero-debt balance while setting aside reserves for equipment upgrades. Judge Davidson studies the documents, his eyebrows rising slightly. For someone supposedly incompetent, Howard says, his voice dry, Mrs. Harrington seems to be doing better than her late husband did in his final years, and I say that with all respect to Philip's memory. I feel a small smile tug at my lips despite everything. Philip would have laughed at that. He used to joke that I was the brains and he was the charm, and together we made one decent business person. Connor is staring at the financial statements like they're written in a foreign language. I can see the confusion on his face. This doesn't match what Vanessa told him. This doesn't match the narrative of the helpless widow making emotional decisions. But Your Honor, Patricia Walsh stands abruptly, the concern isn't just about short-term financial performance, it's about long-term strategy. Mrs. Harrington has rejected multiple offers to sell the company, offers that would have netted over $12 million. Because they came from corporate raiders, I say before I can stop myself, because they would have gutted the company and fired everyone who's worked for us for decades. Judge Davidson holds up a hand. Mrs. Harrington, please, you'll have your chance to testify. I bite my tongue and nod, but Howard picks up the thread smoothly. Your Honor, the offers in question came from companies known for acquisition and liquidation strategies. Mrs. Harrington refused them for the same reason Philip would have, because Harrington Transport isn't just a balance sheet. It's 50 families who depend on steady paychecks. It's relationships with clients built over decades. It's a reputation for reliability that can't be replicated by whoever buys the trucks and the name. He pauses, then adds quietly, and because Philip Harrington spent 40 years building something that mattered, something that lasted. His widow is honoring that, not squandering it. I see something shift in Judge Davidson's expression. He's starting to understand. This isn't about business judgment. This is about what you value, what you protect, what you're willing to sacrifice short-term profit to preserve. Connor is gripping the edge of the table now, his knuckles white. I wonder what he's thinking, if he's starting to question the story Vanessa has been feeding him, if he's remembering the father who always said, Money is a tool, son, not the goal. Or if he's just doing the math, calculating how much $12 million would solve all his problems. Howard closes the folder with the financial statements. Your Honor, to understand how we arrived at this courtroom today, we need to talk about 2018, the year Connor got married. Connor stiffens in his seat. Next to him, a woman I haven't acknowledged until now shifts uncomfortably. Vanessa Sterling Harrington, my daughter-in-law. 36 years old, with honey blonde hair styled in careful waves and a cream-colored suit that whispers expensive. She's beautiful in that carefully maintained way. Regular salon visits, personal trainer, the kind of beauty that requires constant investment. She's also the reason my son is trying to take everything from me. Connor met Vanessa at a business conference in Chicago, Howard says. She was working as an investment analyst for Bradford & Associates. By all accounts, she was competent at her job, smart, ambitious, and very interested in Connor's family business. I remember the first time Connor brought her home. It was a Sunday dinner, and Philip had made his famous pot roast. Vanessa had arrived in 4-inch heels and a dress better suited for a cocktail party than a family meal. Mrs. Harrington, she'd said, shaking my hand with a grip that was just a touch too firm. Connor has told me so much about you. And this house? What year was it built? Not it's beautiful, not what a lovely home, but what year? Like she was already calculating property values. Philip had caught my eye across the table and raised one eyebrow, our private signal for we'll talk about this later. They married 6 months after they met, Howard continues, and almost immediately, things began to change in the Harrington family dynamic. Objection, Patricia Walsh says sharply. Where is counsel going with this character assassination? My client's marriage is not on trial here. Your Honor, Howard replies calmly, I'm establishing a pattern of behavior that directly led to this lawsuit. I'm showing why Philip Harrington made the choices he did in his will, and I'm demonstrating that this case is not, as opposing counsel claims, about an incompetent widow. It's about something else entirely. Judge Davidson considers this. I'll allow it, but get to the point, Mr. Bennett. Howard nods. After the marriage, Connor's visits to his parents decreased significantly, from weekly to monthly to occasional. When he did visit, Vanessa would accompany him, and she had a habit of asking very specific questions about the business. Valuation, succession planning, asset distribution. I remember those conversations. How Vanessa would casually mention estate planning articles she'd read, or wealth management strategies she'd encountered in her work. How she'd suggest that Philip should think about Connor's future and make sure everything was structured properly. At first, I'd thought she was just being professional, using her financial background to help. But Philip had been less charitable. She's counting chickens that haven't hatched yet, he'd said one night after they left. And some of those chickens are still eggs. I'd laughed, but he hadn't. Daphne, I'm serious. Watch Connor around her. Watch how he changes. And I had watched. I'd seen my confident, independent son gradually become smaller, more uncertain, always checking Vanessa's reaction before expressing an opinion, always deferring to her on financial matters, even simple ones. In 2020, Howard says, Philip discovered something troubling. Connor had been taking unauthorized loans from the company. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, all marked as advances on future inheritance, all approved by Connor without consulting his parents. Connor's face goes red. Vanessa sits very still, her expression frozen. Philip paid the money back into the company himself, Howard continues, and never told Daphne. He didn't want to worry her, but he started keeping detailed records, and he started asking questions. Howard pulls out another document. This is a credit report for Connor Harrington from January 2023, 3 months before Philip's cancer diagnosis. It shows approximately $40,000 in credit card debt, split across 6 cards, all of them maxed out. I feel like I've been punched in the stomach. $40,000? When did that happen? How did I not know? Your Honor, Patricia Walsh is on her feet. This is a gross invasion of my client's privacy. Your client sued his mother for $8 million, Howard interrupts, his voice sharp for the first time. His financial situation is absolutely relevant. I'll allow it, Judge Davidson says. Continue, Mr. Bennett. But Howard doesn't continue, not yet. Instead, he looks at me, his expression gentle. Daphne, Philip didn't tell you about the debts because he knew you'd try to fix it. He knew you'd give Connor money, bail him out, make it easier. And he knew that would be the worst thing you could do. Tears prick my eyes. That's exactly what I would have done. That's exactly who I am, the mother who can't bear to see her child struggle. But Philip had known something I hadn't been willing to see. Sometimes love means letting someone face consequences. So Philip made a choice, Howard says, turning back to the judge. He created a will that would protect his wife, protect the business, and give his son one final chance to prove what kind of man he really was. Howard walks to the center of the courtroom, commanding everyone's attention. Your Honor, Philip Harrington's will contains conditions that Connor must meet before receiving his inheritance. And one of those conditions is very simple. Demonstrate respect for his mother and appreciation for the sacrifices she made. Howard lets that sink in before adding, by filing this lawsuit, by trying to have his mother declared incompetent, by demanding immediate access to money he hasn't earned, Connor has failed that test spectacularly. Connor is shaking his head, his face pale. No, that's not... Mom, I was just trying to protect Dad's legacy. I wasn't trying to... We'll recess for 30 minutes, Judge Davidson announces, banging his gavel. When we return, I want to hear from Mrs. Harrington directly, and then we'll discuss these conditions in Mr. Harrington's will. As people start to move, I sit perfectly still, because I know what's coming next. The truth. All of it. And after that, nothing will ever be the same. After the recess, I take the stand. My legs feel unsteady, but I make it to the chair without stumbling. The bailiff has me place my hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, as if I'd do anything else. Judge Davidson looks at me with something that might be kindness. Mrs. Harrington, I'd like to hear from you directly. Let's start with March 2023. Can you tell us what happened then? March, the month everything changed. Philip had been feeling tired, I begin, my voice quieter than I'd like. He thought it was just aging. He was 68. We both were slowing down, but then he started losing weight, 20 pounds in 6 weeks. I made him go to the doctor. I can still see Philip's face when Dr. Morrison called with the test results. How he'd listened silently, asked 3 calm questions, then hung up and looked at me with eyes that were already saying goodbye. Pancreatic cancer, I continue. Stage 3. The oncologist said 12 to 18 months with treatment. Maybe less. How did Connor react to the news? Judge Davidson asks. I glance at my son. He's staring at the table, his jaw clenched. He was devastated. He came to the hospital right away. He cried. He told his father he loved him. I pause. That was real. Whatever else has happened, I believe that was real. Connor's head jerks up, surprise flickering across his face. But Vanessa didn't come in, I add quietly. She stayed in the car. Connor said she was uncomfortable in hospitals, that her mother had died in one. I look at Vanessa now. She meets my gaze steadily, and for just a moment I see something human there. Pain, maybe. Or the memory of pain. I didn't judge her for that, I say, and I mean it. Grief is complicated. We all handle it differently. What happened over the next several months? The judge prompts. Philip started treatment, chemo, radiation. Some days were better than others. I took care of him, gave him his medications, made sure he ate, stayed with him through the bad nights. My voice catches. We'd been married 45 years. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And Connor? He visited. At first, twice a week, then once a week, then I trail off. Less. Howard stands. Mrs. Harrington, do you know why Connor's visits became less frequent? I look at my son again. I think he was struggling. Watching your father die is hard. Maybe it was easier to stay away. That's not true, Connor bursts out. I was trying to keep the business running. Dad couldn't work anymore, and you were focused on taking care of him, so someone had to... Mr. Harrington, Judge Davidson interrupts. You'll have a chance to respond. Let your mother finish. Connor slumps back in his chair. Vanessa puts a hand on his arm, but he shakes it off. Interesting. Mrs. Harrington, Howard says gently, in August 2023, did your husband ask you to review the company's financial records? Yes. He was too weak to do it himself. He asked me to look at the expense reports from the previous 6 months. What did you find? I take a breath. There were payments I didn't recognize. Consulting fees, $45,000 over 3 months. Made out to a company called Sterling Solutions LLC. Vanessa's maiden name, Sterling. I asked Philip about it. He said he'd noticed them too, that he'd been waiting to see if I would. I look at Connor. We called you, asked you to come over. That conversation had been one of the worst of my life. Watching Philip, so weak he could barely sit up, trying to understand why his son had been funneling money out of the company. Watching Connor fumble for explanations that didn't quite make sense. Connor said Vanessa had set up the LLC as a tax strategy, I continue, that it was legal, that it would save the company money in the long run. Was it legal? Judge Davidson asks. Technically, yes, Howard answers, but it was also completely unnecessary. The consulting services Sterling Solutions provided were vague at best, and the money that went into that LLC came right back out, into Connor and Vanessa's personal accounts. Connor's face is red now. We were planning to invest it back into the company. It was just temporary. $45,000 disappeared into your personal accounts while your father was dying of cancer, Howard says flatly. What were you investing in, Connor? Because it wasn't the company. Silence. Connor opens his mouth, closes it. He has no answer. Vanessa does. Your Honor, my husband and I have nothing to hide. Yes, we withdrew those funds. We had expenses. Expenses, Howard repeats. Like the $35,000 wedding ring you purchased in September, or the lease on a BMW 7 Series, or the vacation to Turks and Caicos in October while Philip was in hospice care. The courtroom is so quiet I can hear someone's phone buzzing in their bag. Philip didn't fire Connor, I say softly. He didn't even reduce his salary, but he did remove him from financial decisions, and he asked our lawyer to come to the house. This was in October 2023? Judge Davidson asks. Yes. Philip and Howard spent 2 hours locked in his study. When Howard came out, he hugged me and said, I swallow hard. He said Philip was a wise man, that I should trust him, even when he was gone. I hadn't understood then. I'd been too focused on counting pills, on managing pain, on watching the man I loved slip away day by day. Philip rewrote his entire will, Howard explains. The previous version had been standard, everything to Daphne, then to Connor upon her death. Simple, clean. And the new version? Judge Davidson asks. Howard opens his briefcase and pulls out a thick document. The new version created a trust. All assets, the company, the properties, the bank accounts, approximately $8 million, were placed in a trust managed by Mrs. Harrington and myself as co-trustees. With conditions for Connor's inheritance, the judge says. Yes, specific measurable conditions designed to help Connor develop the qualities Philip felt he was lacking. Patricia Walsh stands. Your Honor, my client was never informed of these conditions in detail. The will reading mentioned them vaguely, but because Philip wanted to see what Connor would do without the threat of disinheritance hanging over his head, Howard interrupts. Would Connor respect his mother's grief? Would he give her time to heal? Would he trust the process his father had set up? Or would he immediately lawyer up and demand what he felt he was owed? The judge leans forward. What were these conditions specifically? Howard reads from the document. First, Connor must work in any position at Harrington Transport, excluding executive roles, for a minimum of 2 years. This would allow him to understand the business from the ground up, the way Philip did. I remember Philip explaining this to me. He needs to know what it's like to drive a route at 4 a.m., Philip had said, to load a truck in the rain, to explain to a client why a shipment is late. He's never done the hard parts, Daphne, only the easy ones. Second, Howard continues, Connor must participate in financial counseling and submit quarterly reports showing responsible debt management. Connor flinches at that, so he knows his father knew about the debts. Third, Connor must maintain a stable, respectful relationship with his mother, monthly dinners, regular communication, not monitored, but, present. I feel tears prick my eyes. Philip had known what I'd need after he was gone. Not Connor's money, not Connor's grand gestures. Just my son, just some time together. And fourth, Connor must donate 10% of his income to charity, any charity he chooses. Philip wanted him to understand that wealth comes with responsibility. These aren't impossible conditions. They're not even particularly hard. They're just character, the kind of character Philip hoped he'd raised Connor to have. And if Connor met these conditions, Judge Davidson asks. After 2 years, he'd receive half the inheritance, approximately $4 million. The other half would come when Daphne passed, along with full ownership of the company. And if he didn't meet them? Then Daphne would have full discretion over the assets. She could give Connor his inheritance anyway, if she felt he'd grown enough to handle it. Or she could redirect the funds to the employees, to charity, wherever she thought Philip would have wanted. It's elegant, really. Philip had given Connor a roadmap to redemption and given me the power to judge whether he'd followed it. But there's one more clause, the one nobody knows about yet. Mrs. Harrington, the judge says, your husband died in December 2023, is that correct? December 28th, at home, in our bed. I have to stop and breathe. I was holding his hand. The courtroom blurs with tears, but I blink them back. I've cried enough. Right now, I need to be strong. His last words to me were, trust the plan, Daphne, even when it hurts. I look at Connor. I didn't know what he meant then. I do now. Was Connor with you when Philip passed? No. He'd visited that morning. Philip was drifting in and out of consciousness. Connor held his hand and said, my voice breaks. He said, I'll make you proud, Dad. I promise. Connor's face crumples. For a moment, he looks like the little boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort. Philip died 6 hours later. Connor was on his way back, but he didn't make it in time. I'd called Connor's cell phone 4 times. It kept going to voicemail. Later, I found out he and Vanessa had stopped for dinner. They'd needed to talk, he'd said, about the future, about plans, about money. The funeral was 2 days later, I continue. It was packed. All 50 employees came. The drivers served as pallbearers. Philip would have liked that. And Connor? He was there. He gave a eulogy. He talked about what a great father Philip had been. What a great businessman. I pause. He didn't mention that Philip had been a great husband, or that he'd built the company with a partner, but I suppose that's not surprising. Connor had never really thought of me as anything but Mom. 1 week after the funeral, Howard came to read the will. Connor and Vanessa were there. I remember that day. The formal reading in Howard's office, all of us sitting around a conference table that smelled like lemon polish. Connor had worn a black suit. Vanessa, a charcoal dress that probably cost more than my first car. Howard read the trust provisions, the conditions, everything except... I trail off. Except what, Mrs. Harrington? Judge Davidson prompts. Except the lawsuit clause. Patricia Walsh's head snaps up. What lawsuit clause? Howard turns to face the courtroom. Philip included one additional provision, one he hoped would never be necessary, one he prayed Connor wouldn't trigger. He pauses, and in that pause, I can feel the entire room holding its breath. The clause states that if Connor challenges the will in court or attempts to remove Daphne as trustee through legal action, he forfeits all inheritance rights permanently and irrevocably. The silence is deafening. Connor is shaking his head. No, that's not... Why wasn't that in the will reading? It was, Howard says calmly. You just didn't pay attention. You heard conditions and you heard trust and you stopped listening. Because you'd already decided, hadn't you? You and Vanessa. You'd already decided that your mother was standing between you and $8 million. That's not true, Connor's voice cracks. I was trying to protect Dad's legacy. Your father's legacy is sitting right there, Howard points at me. 45 years of partnership, 45 years of building something together, and you tried to take it from her 4 months after she buried him. Connor turns to me, his face desperate. Mom, I didn't know about the clause. I swear I didn't know. If I had, would it have mattered? I ask quietly. Would you have chosen differently? Or would you have just been more careful about how you came after me? He has no answer. Vanessa stands abruptly. Your Honor, this is entrapment. The will was deliberately written to test my son's character, I interrupt, standing too. To see if he'd choose family or money, love or greed, patience or immediate gratification. I walk to the center of the courtroom, facing Connor directly. Your father loved you. He loved you so much that he spent his last weeks on earth creating a way to save you from yourself. He knew about the debts. He knew about Vanessa's influence. He knew you were weak. Connor flinches as if I've slapped him. But he also believed you could be strong, that if given time, if given structure, If given a reason to develop character instead of just chasing money, you might become the man he always hoped you'd be. Tears are streaming down Connor's face now. And instead, I continue, my voice breaking, instead you sued me. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You got up on that stand and said I was making emotional decisions and losing Dad's legacy. You chose Vanessa's fear over your mother's grief. You chose money over family. I'm sorry, Connor whispers. Mom, I'm so sorry. You thought it would be easy, I finish. You thought I'd just roll over. You thought wrong. I turn to Judge Davidson. Your Honor, my husband gave our son a test, a final terrible test, and Connor failed it. The judge removes his glasses, rubbing his eyes. When he looks up, he seems older, tired. Mr. Bennett, he says, I need to see this will, all of it, including this lawsuit clause, and I need to verify its authenticity with the witnesses who signed it. Of course, Your Honor. Howard hands over a certified copy. You'll see Philip Harrington's signature, witnessed by 2 notaries, and certified by his physician as being of sound mind on the date of signing. While the judge reviews the documents, Connor is staring at his hands. Vanessa has moved away from him, putting physical distance between them. Even she can see how this is going to end. I sit back down, suddenly exhausted. This is almost over, but not quite, because there's still one more revelation to come. One more truth that will change everything Connor thought he knew. And this time, I'm not sure any of us will survive it intact. Judge Davidson finishes reviewing the will and looks up. His expression is grave. This document is legally sound, the language is clear, and the lawsuit clause is unambiguous. He turns to Connor. Mr. Harrington, did you understand that by filing this lawsuit you were risking your entire inheritance? Connor's voice is barely audible. I didn't know about the clause. That's not what I asked. Did you understand that challenging your father's will might have consequences? Connor swallows hard. Yes. But Vanessa said, What did I say? Vanessa interrupts, her voice sharp. She stands, and for the first time I see cracks in her careful composure. I said we should talk to a lawyer. I said we should understand our options. I never told you to sue your mother. Connor stares at her like she's speaking a foreign language. You brought me the papers. You set up the meeting with Patricia. You said, I said we needed to protect ourselves, Vanessa snaps. You're the one who signed the complaint. You're the one who got up on that stand and called your mother incompetent. The courtroom is silent, watching this marriage implode in real time. Mrs. Harrington, Connor turns to Vanessa, his voice rising. Are you seriously going to stand there and pretend you weren't pushing for this? That you weren't the one who said we couldn't wait 2 years? That you weren't the one who showed me that donation to charity and said Mom was wasting my inheritance? Our inheritance, Vanessa corrects coldly. And yes, I thought the conditions were unreasonable. I thought 2 years was too long. But I also thought you'd grown a spine by now. Apparently, I was wrong. I see it then, the moment Connor realizes he's been played, that the woman he's been defending, the woman he chose over his own mother, has just thrown him under the bus to save herself. Your Honor, a voice calls from the back of the courtroom. May I approach? Everyone turns. A woman in her 50s is standing near the door. She's dressed simply, jeans and a cardigan, and she looks nervous. Judge Davidson frowns. Who are you? My name is Rachel Thompson. I was Vanessa's sister-in-law, from her first marriage. The courtroom erupts. Patricia Walsh is objecting. Howard is on his feet, but Connor has gone absolutely still, his face white. First marriage? He says. Vanessa, what is she talking about? Vanessa has sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She won't look at anyone. Judge Davidson bangs his gavel. Order, Ms. Thompson, this is highly irregular, but given the circumstances, he pauses. Approach. Rachel walks to the front of the courtroom. She looks at Vanessa with something that isn't quite pity and isn't quite anger. I'm sorry, Rachel says to her. I really am, but he deserves to know. Know what? Connor's voice breaks on the words. Rachel turns to him. Vanessa was married to my brother James for 4 years, from 2013 to 2017. She told you she'd never been married before, didn't she? Connor nods mutely. She left James with $70,000 in credit card debt. Debt he didn't know about until the creditors started calling. Rachel's voice is steady but sad. She's not a bad person. She's sick. She has what her therapist called scarcity trauma from growing up with a gambling addict father. She spends money to feel safe, then panics, then spends more to fix it. It's a cycle. Your Honor, Patricia Walsh tries again. This is hearsay and completely irrelevant. It's relevant to motive, Howard says quietly. It's relevant to why this lawsuit was filed. And it's relevant to whether Connor was acting on his own or being manipulated. Rachel pulls an envelope from her purse. I brought the divorce decree, and James's bankruptcy filing, and the therapist's evaluation from their custody case. They have a daughter. Vanessa hasn't seen her in 6 years. The last part hits like a bomb. Connor turns to Vanessa, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. You have a daughter? Vanessa finally looks up. Her carefully applied makeup is smudged now, tears cutting tracks through foundation. I gave up custody. I couldn't take care of her. Not with my problems. What problems? Connor demands. What other things haven't you told me? But Vanessa just shakes her head. She stands, smooths her skirt with trembling hands, and looks at Judge Davidson. Your Honor, I'd like to withdraw from these proceedings. I have no legal standing here anyway. This is between Connor and his mother. She picks up her purse. I'll file for divorce next week. Connor deserves better than what I can give him. She walks out of the courtroom without looking back. Connor doesn't try to stop her. The silence after Vanessa leaves is suffocating. Connor sits alone at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer having quietly gathered her things and excused herself. He looks smaller somehow, defeated. Judge Davidson clears his throat. Mr. Harrington, do you wish to continue with this lawsuit? Connor doesn't answer for a long moment. When he does, his voice is hollow. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I thought I was protecting my father's legacy. I thought my mother was making mistakes. But I was wrong about everything, wasn't I? That's not for me to determine, the judge says, but his tone is gentler now. What I can determine is the legal validity of Philip Harrington's will and the conditions contained therein. He puts his glasses back on and reads from the document. The will states clearly, should my son Connor initiate legal action against his mother regarding this will or trust, he shall forfeit all inheritance rights permanently and irrevocably. Those are not ambiguous terms. Connor's shoulders slump. Furthermore, Judge Davidson continues, I've reviewed the financial statements provided by Mrs. Harrington's counsel. The company is thriving under her management. There is no evidence of incompetence, mismanagement, or undue influence. In fact, the evidence suggests the opposite, that Mrs. Harrington is an experienced, capable businesswoman who understands the company intimately. He looks at Connor with something that might be sympathy. Your father created a test, Mr. Harrington, a test of character. He hoped you would choose patience over immediate gratification, trust over suspicion, family over money. He gave you very clear conditions, reasonable conditions, that would have led to your inheritance. And instead of following them, you sued your mother 4 months after burying your father. Connor's head drops into his hands. The law is clear. The will is clear. And Philip Harrington's intentions were clear. Judge Davidson picks up his gavel. Therefore, I rule that the trust established by Philip Harrington shall remain intact, with Daphne Harrington as primary trustee. Connor Harrington's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, per the explicit terms of the will, Connor Harrington has forfeited all rights to any portion of his father's estate. The gavel falls with a crack that echoes like thunder. This court is adjourned. I stand on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun harsh and bright after the dimness inside. Howard is beside me, his hand on my elbow, steadying. You should feel vindicated, he says quietly. Philip's plan worked. But I don't feel vindicated. I feel hollowed out, empty. Connor emerges from the courthouse alone. His tie is loosened, his jacket slung over one arm. He looks lost. When he sees me, he stops. For a long moment, we just stare at each other, mother and son. Two people who used to know each other so well and who have somehow become strangers. Mom, he finally says, his voice cracking. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. The words come out harsher than I intended. I'm so tired, so incredibly tired. I'm sorry. Tears stream down his face now, and he doesn't bother wiping them away. I'm so sorry. I let Vanessa convince me that you were the problem, that you were standing between me and what was mine. But it was never mine, was it? None of it, because I never earned it. I want to comfort him. Every maternal instinct I have is screaming at me to hug my son, tell him it's okay, that we'll figure this out. But I can hear Philip's voice in my head. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Your father gave you a gift, I say quietly. He gave you a roadmap to becoming the man you were meant to be. All you had to do was follow it. Wait 2 years. Work in the business. Learn what it means to earn something instead of expecting it. And you couldn't do it. I know. Connor's voice is barely a whisper. I know, and I hate myself for it. Hating yourself is easy, I tell him. Changing yourself is hard. He nods, wiping his face with the back of his hand. What do I do now? I don't know, Connor. That's not my decision anymore. I start to walk away, then stop. But your father's conditions? The ones you were supposed to meet over 2 years? They're still good advice. Get a job. Learn to live within your means. Pay off your debts. Figure out who you are without Vanessa whispering in your ear. And then? Hope flickers in his eyes. If I do all that, is there a chance? Don't do it for the money, I interrupt. Don't do it to get back into my good graces or to earn your inheritance. Do it because you need to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. I walk to Howard's car, my heels clicking on the concrete. Behind me, I hear Connor make a sound that might be a sob, but I don't turn around. The house is too quiet now. It's been too quiet since Philip died, but somehow it feels even emptier after the trial. I throw myself into the business. The company becomes my refuge. I arrive at the office at 6 in the morning and leave at 8 at night. I negotiate contracts. I upgrade equipment. I implement the safety protocols Philip and I had discussed but never had time to execute. The employees respond. Morale improves. Profits increase. The quarterly reports are so good that Howard jokes I should write a business book, How to Run a Trucking Company While Grieving Your Husband and Disowning Your Son. I don't laugh. I hear about Connor through the grapevine. He sold his BMW and bought a used Honda. He moved into a small apartment downtown. He got a job, not at our company, but as a driver for a competing firm. He shows up on time, doesn't complain, keeps his head down. Part of me is proud. Part of me is heartbroken that it took losing everything for him to start building character. I don't call him. He doesn't call me. We exist in separate orbits, connected by blood, but divided by choices. On the 6-month anniversary of the trial, Howard comes to my office with a manila envelope. Philip left this with me, he says, with instructions to give it to you 6 months after everything was resolved. My hands shake as I take it. Philip's handwriting on the front. For Daphne, when you need perspective. I wait until I'm home, until I'm sitting in Philip's study surrounded by his books and his smell, the faint scent of his cologne still lingering in the curtains, before I open the envelope. The letter inside is long, written in Philip's careful script. I recognize the shakiness of the letters. He wrote this near the end when his hands barely worked. My dearest Daphne, if you're reading this, 6 months have passed since the trial. And if there was a trial, it means Connor made the choice I feared he would. I'm heartbroken. Not surprised, but heartbroken. Because I saw this coming, my love. I saw it in the small moments. The way he'd borrow money and promise to pay it back, but never did. The way he'd make excuses for his mistakes instead of learning from them. The way he chose Vanessa, a woman who saw him as a meal ticket, over the people who truly loved him. But here's what I need you to understand. I didn't create that will to punish Connor. I created it to save him. The inheritance would have been his bottomless pit. He would have spent it within 5 years, probably less, with Vanessa's help. And then he'd have nothing. No money, no character, no resilience. He'd be 50 years old with no idea how to stand on his own feet. By taking away the safety net when he chose greed over family, I forced him to build something he's never had to build before. Himself. I have to stop reading. Tears are blurring the words. I wipe my eyes and continue. Daphne, you're wondering if you should forgive him, if you should help him, if there's a way to fix this and be a family again. My answer is, wait. Watch him. See if he changes. Not because he thinks it'll get him back in your good graces, but because he genuinely becomes a better man. You'll know the difference. You've always been better at seeing into people's hearts than I was. If Connor truly transforms, if he learns to work hard, live honestly, take responsibility for his choices, then the trust allows you to restore his inheritance. You have that power. I gave it to you deliberately. But if he never changes, if he stays bitter and entitled, then give it all to the employees. They built this company alongside us. They deserve it more than a son who couldn't appreciate what he had. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely hold the paper. The money was never the point, my love. The man Connor becomes is the point. I know you're in pain right now. I know you feel like you've lost both your husband and your son, but you haven't lost Connor. He's just lost himself, and he needs to find his way back on his own. Trust the plan. Trust him to either rise or fall by his own choices. And trust yourself to know the difference. I love you beyond death, Philip P.S. There's a separate account Howard knows about. $2 million that Connor never knew existed. It's for you. Travel. Live. Take that trip to Ireland you always talked about. You've earned it. I fold the letter carefully and hold it to my chest. Outside, the sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Philip's favorite colors. I miss you, I whisper to the empty room. I miss you so much. But I also know what I have to do now. Wait, watch, and see if my son has the strength to become the man his father believed he could be. 2 years later, it's December again. 2 years since Philip died. 2.5 years since the trial. I'm in the kitchen making dinner, just for myself as usual, when the doorbell rings. I'm not expecting anyone. When I open the door, Connor is standing there. But he's different. Thinner, yes, but it's more than that. There's something solid about him now. Something settled. Hi, Mom. His voice is tentative. I know I should have called first, but I was afraid you'd tell me not to come. What do you want, Connor? I don't mean to sound cold, but the words come out that way. Nothing. He takes a breath. I wanted to tell you something. I paid off all my debts, every penny. It took 2 years, but they're gone. I study him. His coat is worn but clean. His boots are scuffed work boots, the kind the drivers wear. I'm still driving trucks, he continues, for Morrison Logistics. They promoted me to route supervisor last month. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm good at it. That's good, I say carefully. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small booklet. I've been going to meetings for gambling addiction. I didn't think I had a problem, but I did. The therapist says I was addicted to the big win, to shortcuts, to finding the easy way instead of the right way. He hands me the booklet. It's a 12-month sobriety chip from Gamblers Anonymous. I'm not here for money, Connor says quickly. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying, that I'm becoming the person Dad wanted me to be, even if it's too late. I look at my son, really look at him, and for the first time in 3 years, I see the boy I raised. The one who used to help Philip wash the trucks on weekends, the one who wanted to make us proud. It's not too late, I hear myself say. Come inside. I'm making pot roast. Connor's eyes widen. Mom, you don't have to... I know, but I'm inviting you anyway. Just dinner. No promises beyond that. He nods, swallowing hard. Just dinner would be really good. As he steps inside, I think about Philip's letter, about how he said I'd know when Connor had truly changed. And I do know. I can see it in the way my son walks now. No swagger, no entitlement, just quiet determination. Over dinner, Connor tells me about his life, about the people he sponsors in GA, about the woman he's dating, Elizabeth, a teacher, someone who has no idea his family was ever wealthy, about the scholarship fund he started with his first big paycheck, helping kids from gambling-addicted families pay for college. I named it after Dad, he says quietly, the Philip Harrington Second Chance Scholarship, because that's what he gave me, a second chance, even if I didn't understand it at the time. After he leaves, I call Howard. I want to make Connor a beneficiary again, I tell him. Not the full inheritance, not yet, but monthly payments, enough to be comfortable if he maintains this trajectory. And the full inheritance? When I die, but only if he stays on this path. If he backslides, it all goes to the employees. I pause. And Howard? Don't tell him. Let him keep building his life without expectations. Let him be surprised when he finds out. Philip would approve, Howard says. That night, I dream of Philip. We're young again, sitting in that old pickup truck, planning our future. In the dream, he takes my hand and says, "We did good, Daphne. Our boy found his way." When I wake up, I'm crying. But for the first time in 3 years, they're not tears of grief. They're tears of hope.